Hello, everyone. I'm Catherine Meade. I'm a technical director at Sparkbox. And today I'd like to start us with a question. How often does what we build today look the same after 5 years? How often does what we build today look the same after 5 years? Nothing works like practical application. So we're going to get in our time machine and head back to June of 2019, which was around 5 years ago. Wow, 2019. We better avoid our past selves. Here I was in the Nintendo store in New York City. I've changed a lot since then. I don't have to wear glasses anymore, and I gave up on the bangs. But we're not here for me. So let's set the dial to way back. See what I did there? Looks like my DeLorean is getting a signal from the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine. First stop, Apple.com, my favorite influencer of web design. So here we are at apple.com in early 2019. You can see the new iPhone XR is available for only $449. So how much has Apple's website changed in 5 years? Let's hop back to today and check it out. Here's today's website. Okay, we're in the future. We've got the Apple Vision Pro, but wait a minute. It does kind of actually look the same, doesn't it? The navigation is fairly different. So in 2019, each top level item took you to a landing page, but the 2024 version has this mega nav instead. But let's try somewhere else, right? Barnes and Noble. In 2019, booksellers were struggling to make a dent in the powerhouse that is Amazon. We all watched as their favorite book chains slowly turned into spirit Halloween stores. But Barnes and Noble was one of the last holdouts. So they knew that people who bought books from them were doing so because they loved walking around the physical store and smelling the books. Or maybe smelling books is just for me. But still, online wasn't a major priority for them. And from this dated layout, it was obvious. However, the book industry has had a bit of a renaissance in a post-2020 world. People couldn't buy in the bookstore during lockdown, and many people still didn't want to buy from Amazon, so more people were reading and at home. Barnes& Noble has since put in the effort to improve their online presence. So this wider max width alone makes the site seem much more modern than it did just a few years ago, when perhaps they didn't see online book sales to be a major share of their profits. And book sales are still up significantly. So maybe you've heard of Book Talk. It's like the bookish corner of TikTok that drives sales of physical books, especially exclusive editions. I doubt Barnes and Noble foresaw the way social media would revitalize their entire industry. But let's make one more stop at Netflix. In 2019, Netflix still ruled streaming services. The main mission of their landing page was to entice new subscribers by showing them how easy it was to cancel. So if you look at this call out here, it's literally showing you an X button because they're so confident in their product. Not to mention all of the Disney properties highlighted in the background. That's kind of fun. So here's Netflix in 2024. As you probably know, they've had to pivot to work harder to retain subscribers. So streaming competition has been dramatically up, and the market has been flooded with lower price point competitors. So Netflix's $22 a month for the HD service you got in 2019 is quite a bit compared to, say, Peacock, which runs just about $6 a month with ads. So Netflix is now highlighting a lower price tier along with device compatibility for mobile viewers and answering some user questions right on the landing page in order to entice new users to try their product. Their business model has changed and the landing page has had to adapt. So Netflix is a great example of how a business will need to pivot in unexpected ways in just 5 years. And that's enough time travel for now. So back to the question I started us with. How often does what we build today look the same after 5 years? The answer is we don't really know. If we don't know what our users might need in the future, so why are we trying to guess what those problems are right now? What if instead we focused only on the problems of today, but in a way that leaves room for sustainable growth? And there you have it. That's my main thought for you. Focus on today's problems, but leave room for sustainable growth. To create a strong MVP, we want to limit ourselves to expending time and energy only on the things that help us achieve our immediate goals. But we also want to set ourselves up with a solid technical foundation that allows us to adapt for future change, because there will always be changes. Let's start with today's problems. Focusing on the problems of today means we need to stop taking trips in the time machine and trying to predict what our business needs will be in the future. How do we focus on today's problems? One concept we might talk about when planning for MVP with a solid technical foundation is by creating a few prototypes. You have a business goal and you need a proof of concept before investing in the product long term. A prototype is like a quick and messy, bare bones proof of concept. We recently tried out a few different JavaScript static site generators for a new site we built. We needed a website that was simple to contribute to. So we created a few basic prototypes. And I do mean like hello world type basic prototypes. They gave us enough information to ensure we were solving for a business goal of being easy to contribute to. And then we stopped working on those prototypes. As soon as our team understands a good path forward, you move on from the prototype to the work on your MVP. Because a prototype is messy, it's quick, it's built in isolation, and an MVP is a product. It should be simple, but well thought. An MVP should not sacrifice quality or technical integrity for speed to market. Carry over your learning from the prototype, but not the mess you made in the process. But MVP doesn't always mean starting from scratch. Sometimes your MVP can be built on what already exists. So you may have heard of these building terms. Here we have greenfield, which is when a site has never been built on before. You have a fresh earth to till into. And brownfield is when you're building where there used to be a building, the ground is already leveled and there may be a usable foundation. If you have a functional deploy pipeline, but you need a more accessible UI, use your deploy pipeline. If your component library looks outdated but has good accessible component structure, use the component structure. If you have already solved one of today's problems, there's no reason to solve it again. Incorporate your previous learning into your MVP for a more sustainable product. Here's our time machine again. So we're done taking trips to the future to focus on today's problems, though we still don't want to forget the time machine exists. Tomorrow is still coming, so let's put our DeLorean somewhere where we can keep an eye on it. I have a disability, which means I have an accessible parking permit, so my time machine will always be right up front where we won't forget about it. So we're just going to pop that in the window right there before we park. Yeah, that looks great. You're at UnConf today for my jokes, right? Our time machine can be a good reminder that today's problems aren't the only problems. So by focusing on today's problems, we're not planning for specific changes. We're planning for the idea that changes will happen. We're planning for the idea that changes will happen. We have to look at our DeLorean in the driveway and ask, how will I be flexible enough today to implement what I need to solve for tomorrow? So an MVP is an investment. It's not a prototype. It's not something we want to remake greenfield every 3 to 5 years. We must ensure, MVP is a value moving forward to protect the investment we've made. Which brings me to a second part of our main point for today, sustainable growth. So building an MVP with sustainable growth in mind means we are prepared for changes when they happen, even when we don't know what the changes might be. What is the enemy of sustainability? What are we going to do as engineers that makes it difficult for our code bases to accommodate change? Install third-party libraries. Just kidding. That was another joke. Sort of. Let's talk about that for a second. So third-party libraries can solve a lot of problems. Bootstrap can help speed up developers in building a quick UI when you don't have a dedicated design team. And high charts is invaluable in many organizations that don't have an entire department dedicated to creating graphical canvas elements. We probably wouldn't think about shipping a website without some sort of testing or a linting framework, which are provided by a third-party library. So third-party libraries aren't really the issue, but rather a factor in a potentially unsustainable code base. What causes a third-party library to become a problem is when your application needs to change with the business, but your third-party library is inflexible and cannot be changed. So then what is the real enemy of sustainability? Inflexibility. When our technology cannot bend and change to meet our product and our users' growing needs, it will break. When our code base is inflexible, it breaks, which means we have to start over with a new MVP. Including anything in your application that sacrifices flexibility or quality in order to gain speed puts the growth of your MVP at risk. And any partner you work with on your MVP should understand that too. The last section of our main statement today is leave room. I don't want us to miss this part. Not leaving room for change or opportunity makes your organization itself the root of inflexibility. Leaving room means leaving room to revisit your business goal. Don't fall victim to sunk cost fallacy, where you feel like you must continue with a project or a tech stack or a feature or a library simply because you've already worked on it. If the business goals have really changed, the product direction must also change. MVP stands for minimum viable product. If what you're working on is no longer viable, you need to identify what is now viable and work toward that instead. Leaving room also means leaving room for your team. I wrote an entire blog post recently around product champions supporting their developers or the developers they work with. Human beings want to have some ownership over the things they are working on. In that blog post, we talk about being careful with scope and making time for refactoring and technical debt. But primarily, what we need to do to support developers is listen to them. Dysfunctional teams spend too much time in meetings and when they could be building an amazing additional feature for your product. So, in summary, focus on the problems facing you right now. So leave the time machine in the driveway. Build a foundation for sustainable growth that supports the idea of change. And leave room for sustainable growth. Leave room to be flexible and understanding as your team works together to meet your business goals. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for attending our UnConference, and I'll be around for the panel Q&A.